This week, I want us to consider the practical Christian admonitions that are given to the church at Rome by the Apostle Paul in his letter to the Romans in chapter 12. Good morning. This is Pastor Ernie Lewis of the Blue Point Church in Sisney, Illinois, with your thoughts for Monday. You know, the book written to the Romans is a very good doctrinal manual where he writes to the church, which he has never personally met or personally ministered to. So he begins in the first 11 chapters giving us the doctrines of man's depravity, of God's love, even the plan of salvation. Then when Paul reaches chapter 12, he switches from doctrine to practical living. He says there, "I beseech you therefore, brethren, by the mercies of God, that you present your bodies as a living sacrifice, holy, acceptable unto God, which is your reasonable service." Paul has written as a teacher, but now he encourages them as a dear brother in the faith. He says, dear brethren. You know, calling them brethren here is not only a term of endearment, but it reminds this church that Paul has faced the same difficulties that they are facing now in the Christian life. And he begins the verse by saying, "I beseech you," or "I am begging of you, please consider this. I beseech you therefore." And the word therefore means that you have to consider the first 11 chapters of this doctrine, first of all, before you turn to the practical side. He prefaces this request by telling us that the only way we can follow this work in our lives is by the mercies of God. Those are the things that work within our hearts and our minds that draw us to Him or that make us acceptable before Him. What is this great command He gives? That you present your bodies as a living sacrifice. These former Jewish people would understand all about the picture of sacrifice, right? I mean, it meant for them to give the best of their flock, or for that matter, the best of they had. They offered it up to God. But his request is to give our bodies. You see, that's where our thoughts come from. That's where our sinful actions are done. That's where our motivations and our scheming, everything comes from. He's not talking, by the way, about taking our life here as a sacrifice. He's talking about giving our life as a sacrifice to God and doing it over and over and over again every single day. Today, I'm going to sacrifice myself to the Lord. This body that we offer, he says, must be holy. You know, God has said in his word, "Be ye holy, for I am holy." That means that we need to separate ourselves from this world to be a holy sacrifice for God. Paul also reminds us that our bodies should be acceptable. Now, in the Old Testament, the only acceptable sacrifice that would be given to God was the kind that was without spot or without blemish. So it doesn't do us any good to give God a body that is driven by afflictions or blemishes, one that is filled with sin and dishonest dealings. We must present ourselves as acceptable to the Lord. And the last line reminds us that this is your reasonable service. In other words, this is really what's expected of you if you're going to serve and follow the Lord Jesus Christ. By the way, some people translate that line as, "This is your normal act of worship." You realize we may include a lot of things in our worship, such as singing, praying, hearing the speaker, praying fervently for that matter, because we are showing our worship to God. But Paul says the true act of worshiping God must include giving of ourselves as a sacrifice for his daily service. I'm begging you, brethren,